Have you ever found yourself sitting in a quiet room, but your mind is spinning in circles, replaying the same family conversation or situation over and over again in your head? Maybe it's days later, or maybe it's even years later. You find yourself still trying to make sense of it. You analyze the words, you analyze the behavior, and you try desperately to find some kind of a different ending, one where everyone finally gets it and comes together. But it never works. It doesn't fit who you are. It doesn't fit who they say they are or what they profess to believe. And none of it makes any logical sense. If you've ever felt that way, if you felt like you were the only one in the room who could see that something was terribly wrong, you're not alone. And there's a reason this stuff happens. In a lot of cases, it's not even about you. If we haven't met yet, my name's Diana, and I help capable women navigate difficult family relationships so they can stop exhausting themselves trying to fix the unfixable and start reclaiming their peace. We're talking today about that exact moment when those blinders come off, the illusion breaks, and how you can finally stop blaming yourself for a system that you didn't break. Before we dive into all that good stuff, if this conversation resonates with you, I invite you to hit the subscribe button. That tells the algorithm that this validation needs to reach more women who are sitting in this same heavy silence. There was a long time, decades, most of my life actually, I assumed that my family was just normal. We had our ups, we had our downs, we had our good times, we had our bad times, we had tension and disagreement. And I chalked all of that up to normal things that families go through. It's what I'd been trained to believe. It's what a lot of women have been trained to believe. I was a doer. I was a dutiful daughter. I was the one they called when anything needed to get done. And I poured my heart, my soul, my energy, and my time into being the good girl and keeping the peace. As long as I did that, things were great. Until they weren't. And when they weren't, they were not at all okay. I spent years trying to fix it, trying to find solutions, and getting so frustrated when simple, reasonable requests for safety were disregarded. Conversations kept spinning in the same exhausting, soul-crushing circles every single time, and none of it made any sense. But the situation did keep getting worse. In fact, I spent years in therapy trying to understand why these family dynamics that were supposed to be so good were actually so painful, and why I was suddenly the bad guy. But instead of getting answers, I was told I needed to accept them for who they are. This is just how they are, and I needed to learn to tolerate it. Let's be honest about how that feels. It feels like a betrayal of your own sanity. How was I supposed to tolerate behavior that was objectively harmful and wasn't stopping? This wasn't just little tiffs that we were talking about. These situations carried real consequences for me, for my kids, and for our marriage, and also for our very real physical and emotional safety. How was I supposed to look the other way and pretend this stuff wasn't happening or that I didn't know anything about anything? I already knew at that point that doing so would have required me to sell my soul and abandon every part of me, even though I didn't yet have words for what was going on. Unfortunately, that kind of traditional advice often backfires when we're dealing with broken family relationships. They look only at a specific situation or one specific incident, not the whole picture, not the impact it has on everyone else or the whole family. And it's especially challenging to get them to look at or even recognize generations of repeat patterns. What ends up happening is it places the burden of peace on the person who is already carrying the weight of the entire family. It tells us to bend a little more, stay quiet a little longer, be the bigger person so that no one else feels uncomfortable. There came a turning point for me though. The stakes became too high for me to ignore. This was no longer just a disagreement. This was no longer just weird family quirks. There were very real legal implications and safety concerns at stake, and I had to take a stand. I had to defend myself, my marriage, and my kids. And in doing so, I refused to pretend that everything was fine when it clearly was not. And that right there was the undoing of everything. That's when those old rose-colored glasses came crashing to the ground. I could suddenly see that the problem was not really the dangerous issue that I was trying to address. The problem was me, for figuring things out, for pointing it out, and for not playing along. And I could also see that the person that was actually keeping all of this spinning wasn't the person at the center of things who had done some very terrible things. It was the one the entire family system was coddling and had been coddling for decades. That was the real problem. Once I realized what that problem was, I knew that there was no amount of talking or compromise or communication or even logic that could fix it. I was not wrong for standing up. I was not broken for refusing to sweep some massive problem under the rug. I was simply refusing to participate in a script that required me to erase myself. And I had been spinning my wheels, trying to find a logical explanation and solution for behavior that was at its roots abusive. I wasn't perfect, but I also knew I wasn't the real problem. I know now that what I had inadvertently done in my quest to do what I believed was right was I exposed a broken family system. It was a system that looked very charming on the surface, but underneath was held together by denial, control, threats, manipulation, lies, gossip, and all kinds of other terrible behavior that was often done with a smile. Once that exposure happened, the system reacted to protect itself, not to protect me. It took a long time for me to realize that my anger about that situation wasn't the real problem. Did it ever show up in some very regrettable ways? Yeah. But I know now it wasn't because I'm bad or weak or flawed or I'm a terrible person. It was my body and my nervous system telling me that a serious boundary had been violated even before I knew how to put words to it. When you start to see those kind of family dynamics clearly, it brings a very strange mix of relief and grief. When I finally figured this stuff out, I felt an intense amount of relief. This wasn't my fault. I wasn't nuts. I didn't cause this and I didn't do anything wrong. But my entire life suddenly made sense. And yet at the same time, I also felt a tremendous amount of grief that I didn't even know existed. I now knew what the real issue was. I knew who was at the center of it. I knew what its name was. And I knew that my family wasn't who I thought they were. And then came that bitter realization that they truly would rather lose me than solve the problem or lose the illusion of perfection. If you're standing in the middle of that silent room today, take a breath. You're not alone. This is hard stuff, but there is a way to make sense of it. Just know that when you see it, you might not always like what you see, and you can't unsee it once you do. But seeing it does forever change everything. You might be asking yourself at this point, where do I go from here? Well, the first step for me was deciding what I was no longer willing to carry or tolerate. I realized there was no way to find common ground with people who were benefiting from the illusion and completely willing to sweep all of this away. They weren't willing to do the simplest of things to solve a problem that would have ultimately protected everyone. And there was no coming back from that. True emotional healing doesn't start with fixing them. It starts with protecting your own peace. And in my case, that did mean walking away and allowing them to be exactly who they are and live exactly as they're living. And also believing them when they showed me exactly who they are. If you're in that same raw place right now where you're trying to figure out what has happened, I want to give you a soft place to land. I've created a free resource called the Family Drama First Aid Kit. It's designed to give you some immediate, gentle steps to help settle your nervous system when the family noise gets too loud. It can also help you breathe in that silence without it suffocating you. You can find it by clicking in the link down below, either in the description or in the first pinned comment. What I want you to remember is that no matter what's happened or who did what, peace still starts with you, and there is a way to figure out this mess. Thank you for being here with me today. I would love to talk more about this. Go ahead and leave a comment below if you've ever been in a similar moment where those curtains were pulled back or those rose-colored glasses came off, and you could start to see what was really going on. I read them all, I respond to them, and we're all in this together. I'll see you in the next video.